don't really need to say much more. That was wonderful. It's such a sense of joy this morning when I was here. I have to keep it timed because I've only got 15 minutes today. The joy that God has in his children. The joy that I sensed this morning through worship, and just this sense of celebration and just joy. And God has that in his children. And, you know, I only have the one child who's just wonderful. But I just get so much joy from her. I get so much joy when I watch her doing things, when I see her achieving things, when I see her overcoming in things, when I see her having joy in others, in what she's doing and the opportunities that she has. And I just, as a parent, you have that joy. And it brings you much closer to God. You know, this whole process of having children, this whole process of being involved in this way, I think just gives you an opportunity to see God in a way that you wouldn't if you hadn't had kids. And when I was wondering about what I would share this morning, it wasn't going to be this, but it is now. I never wanted children. It was a passion that I didn't want children. It wasn't just, it was, no, it's not going to happen. And my mum who's here today, she can, testify to this. It just wasn't going to happen. And it was very strong in me, and it was a stronghold in me. And one night, I'm sitting alone at home. I'm an adult by this point in time, and I was spending time with God, and God said to me, let it go. Let go. He didn't tell me I was going to have kids. He just said, you need to let it go. You need to let go of this thing about not having kids. And I was in tears, because this is, when a stronghold breaks, it breaks. There's this gushing and rushing and everything else. So I was there in tears, and I said, all right, God, if I have to let this go, and if I have children, we strike a deal now. You have to raise them. You have to be involved, because I can't do it. It's not something that I am even remotely equipped to do. And so God bless him, gave me the easiest child to raise. She has been so easy to raise. She's just been a joy and a blessing. And, I tell her, she's 14 now and she's year 9. And for those of you who've been there, done that, about 14-year-olds in year 9. And she's a little bit like that. But as soon as I say, that's it, she stops. I know, it's amazing. And that's God. That was because we had to have a deal. If I was going to do this, he had to so help me. And he has. As a mum, I just would be horrified at the thought of the kid I would have if it had been left to me. I just need God in this. I just so need God. And along the way, I've learned so many things. I remember when I was much, much younger thinking, if I do become a parent, it's my responsibility to build on what I've had. My mum didn't really have a mum. She passed away when my mum was very young. So she didn't have that example. She had aunties. She even had a stepmum for a little while. But there was a lot of duty and not as much of that mothering love. So she didn't get that. But she became a mum, and she built on what she knew, and she did a better job. And so then it was going to be my responsibility to come along and do a better job again. And because I've got God that I can rely on, and who's raising my daughter for me, I can do more again. And it will be Layla's job when she becomes a mum to do better again, to learn, to build, to add to all that knowledge that's gone before, and take on all the things that we learn. And I remember, no, I don't actually, it's just gone out of my head. I forgot what I remembered. I was going to share, just hold on a second. Old timers. No, that's completely gone. All right then. we will do something else. So, being a mum has radically changed my life. And I have this period, and I understand that I have a finite period of time in which I can sow into Layla's life. I mean, there will always be that relationship. There will always be a relationship with her where she will come to me for different things. More, less and less though as she goes along and gets her own family and so on. There'll always be. But in terms of training her up, in terms of building into the cathedral that's going to be my daughter, I have a finite period of time. And so I put a lot of energy into that. I put a lot of energy into building her up right. I remember we were talking one day about church, and I said, we don't go to church because it's what we do. We go to church because it's who we are. I wanted her to understand that there is no life, as a child of God, there is no life apart from communion with children of God. It doesn't matter whether it's a church like this or whether it's, a house church or whether it's a great big cathedral church. It doesn't matter. You must meet together. You must join together with those who are there. And so sowing into her these things about who she is as a child of God, who she is, who she's meant to be, what it is that God's called her for. And I know a lot of people get words for their children, for their babies when they're born, when they're children and so on. Never had one. Never had one for Layla. No idea what God's got in store for her. Had words with God about that one too, I can tell you. It's like, you're giving them words for their kids. Where's mine? I don't know. It's all blank for me. It's all blank. All I can do is watch her as she walks into the life that God has called for her. But I need to be just working on that. That's the most important job that I've got, which to hear me say that now, if you had known me 30 years ago, you would just freak out. I was like, is that the same person? But God changes us, and then we grow and we sow into the lives of those that we have, that we give birth to. And it's such a privilege that God would join us, and it brings us closer to God. My relationship with God is closer, it's different. It's not to say that you can't have that closeness to God without it, but it adds another dimension. I remember once years ago, the pastor that I had at the time, she talked about pure light. You know that pure light is white light, and then from the white light, if you put it on a prism, you get all those colours that come out of the light. And when we have kids, we get another colour of God's light, and we get a colour of his light that we can't have necessarily from any other way. We become a different shade of God's glory. And one of the things that's so amazing about it is that people don't see, like Jaslyn shared, people don't see what you sow into your kids. Nobody really sees that. You've got to be there. You've got to know, daily what's going on. But God does see it. And as you're doing it, you get this other shade of God's love. You get this other shade of his light, of his truth and of his understanding as you go through. And that's an awesome thing. That's a great and wonderful thing to have that. And I remember, I'll finish with this, I remember many, many years ago reading this prophetic vision that this prophet had. It was a very long prophetic vision. And one of the things that he saw in this vision, because he went up to heaven and he spoke with people who were there, and he shared some of those stories. But as he sort of started back, there was this great, mass of people. And as he got closer and closer to the throne, the demographic changed, and there became, cry now because I cry every time I think about it, more and more women and mothers closer and closer to the throne, because all through their lives they were invisible, but they prayed and they just sought God for everything, and there was no glory on earth. There were no working jobs where they were raised up. There was no preaching from the pulpit where they got seen and known. There was no glory whatsoever for them but they just spent time in prayer with God for their kids, for their families, for nations and so on. So the closer he got, he said he saw more and more women getting there. And that's always encouraged me, coming from the thoughts that I had about the value of being a mother, the value of being a wife, the value of being in the shadows. That God sees it. He sees it and he blesses it. And we may not see the blessing in this life. We may not see it to the next life, but it's there. Amen? Amen. Amen. So that's my little take on motherhood, such that it is. And I will now invite Wendy up.